Good afternoon. This is Jen Bonet with the Creative Coast, and it's lunchtime topic for September 17th. Gosh, it's hard to believe it's September. And today, this is a lunchtime topic in conjunction with our partner, TechSAV, and we have Yvonne Jouffrault with us, who's going to talk about mapping the customer journey. So I'm going to hand it over to Yvonne. I'm going to stay on the line, and if people have got questions, you can post them in the chat, and I'll help try and facilitate from that perspective. But without further ado, the co-founder of TechSAV, Yvonne.
Thank you, Jen, and thanks to the Creative Coast for co-sponsoring and frankly doing all the work for today. And is it okay if I leave my Zoom window up, or can y'all see that? Should I close it?
All I see is, I see the faces across the top and then your slides real big.
Okay, all right, I'll close that. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about mapping the customer journey. I was mentioning to Jen, I've never given this presentation before. It was something I'm always working on the customer journey, always helping everyone map the customer journey, and it's something I've been wanting to talk about for a while. And when I started planning it, I realized there was so much more to talk about than we could do in the next 40 minutes. So first, I'm going to sort of give you an overview of what I'm going to talk about and what I'm not going to talk about. So the first part is really just understanding what the customer journey is. It means a lot of things to a lot of different people. If a product person talks about the customer journey, they're talking about like really detailed kind of user experience, user interface, micro steps within each interaction that the customer has as they use the product. A marketing person talking about the customer journey is going to be talking about where someone's coming from and in terms of which channels they're coming in, what they're searching for. A salesperson is going to be talking about each meeting that they're having with someone, and then a customer success or customer support person is going to be talking more about like the actual interaction with the product or service itself, and then the impression that it has on the customer. So what I'm going to try to do is actually give you an overview of the whole thing and not go too detailed into each one. And then in terms of why this matters, the goal of mapping the customer journey and understanding each part of it and the motivations of the customer behind each step is to identify these micro opportunities or big opportunities if you've never done it before, and then also specific friction points to kind of improve that customer experience along all of those different parts that I just mentioned, and I'm going to go into a little more. And I'm also going to give some examples, because the best way to understand something really is to see examples. I'm going to choose 3 different companies that I've worked with all in the last few months, just to show you how different the customer journey can be based on the buyer persona, based on the type of product. I didn't get into services. I mean, you could do this for services too, but I had to stop somewhere. So, and then if you want to learn more, I mean, there's tons of great resources online about the customer journey and all the different parts of it and how to map it and what to look for. The one thing I'm not going to show you is how to actually do it and which tools. There's so many different ways. If you're interested in starting your journey to map your customer journey, you can just use Google Docs. It's great, or Google Sheets. I mean, there's lots of really complicated tools out there, and frankly, or just a whiteboard. Actually, whiteboards are the best way to start with mapping your customer journey. So there's an overview of the presentation. A little bit about me. I'm sure that I know most of you, so I won't go into too much detail. Recently, what I've done, Recently, what I've been working on, which is really the inspiration for this talk, is I've been a fractional chief marketing officer for a machine learning startup in Paris that has a platform that allows data scientists to work on sensitive private data without actually seeing it and having access to it. They can still run their models on it. And then also Coastal Voice, which is a local Savannah business, a phone service for businesses. So I'll talk about each of these in my presentation. That's kind of what I'm up to lately during COVID. All right, so we'll jump right in, I guess. No questions? I'll see the little thing pop up. So
no questions just yet.
All right. Oh, shoot. All right, so what is the customer journey? It's going to be every interaction that the customer has with your brand or company. And this goes all the way back to the time they realize they have a problem. So this isn't from the time they come to your website. And we'll talk more about that. And this is really going to be the holistic view. So depending on how big your company is and how many people that your customer talks to throughout this entire journey, from the time they realize they have a problem all the way to when they're like happily using and engaging with your product, They might interact with multiple people, your application, your product, your website, your social media, your automated emails, a salesperson. So when you look at the customer journey, your goal is to kind of get a holistic view of all of these interactions and both break them down in terms of each one and the motivation and what needs to happen at each one, but also you want to make sure that this is a seamless experience for the customer, and that it doesn't feel disparate, and that you're reinforcing your value at each step. So the reason that we map it is so that we can both identify and understand the needs and desired outcomes for each step, so that we can better design that interaction. But then also, as I just mentioned, so that we can reinforce the value of our offering, improve the relationship, and last, it's really to learn from the customer, because I've worked with big companies that have 200 employees, and they weren't collecting valuable information deep into their customer journey that would have helped their sales and marketing and their product positioning, and they were looking for a way to pivot. So it's also to identify opportunities to kind of mine your customer journey for valuable information that can go back into your feedback loop to improve your product and your company. So the three parts, you notice there's 4 on here, but there's 3 parts to the customer journey. The first part is the problem search and education. So those are kind of grouped into 1 and 1.1. So the problem search is going to be when the customer realizes, like, I have a problem and I need something. And some people might say, sometimes this might actually start with an outbound sales call, or it might start with content marketing that's already out there, where I read an article about a company that's solving a problem and I say, hey, I have that problem. So that could be triggered by content or marketing or sales, but it's the first time that the customer says, oh my gosh, I have this problem and I'm going to go look for a solution. And then the education part is after they've encountered your product. And this might have happened first, but it depends on the product. And this is going to be the customer's process of evaluating your solution. This might involve comparing it to alternative solutions. It might involve interacting with the salesperson. It might involve asking for recommendations, referrals. But this is the customer's process of really educating themselves on your offering and deciding if it's something that they want to move forward with. The conversion, now this can include, especially for like freemium models, the conversion part. So this is the second part of the customer journey. This is the process of making a decision to buy, pulling the trigger, signing up, onboarding, and this can be, and I put getting the customer to the aha moment here. It could also be an education. For products that have online self-service freemium models, education and conversion are actually kind of combined, but I'm not really going to talk about that today. So, and then the last part is going to be the ongoing usage, and this is actually using the product, and this is the goals here are going to be increased usage and being happy with it, and usually this falls within the customer support or customer success groups. So those are all the parts of the customer journey. And I'm just going to jump right into some examples first before we talk about how to map it, because I think it's easier to use examples to understand it first. So for Coastal Voice, this is the small business phone service. So this is a commodity product. Everyone knows what a business phone service is and what it does. Most companies who need one already have one. And the decision maker here is going to be the small business owner or, probably an office manager. And so the differentiator for Coastal Voice, even though they tend to be cheaper and better quality than Comcast Business, which is the main alternative, but their differentiator is really that they have a local person who understands the business, sets up the phone system, answers the questions. A lot of small businesses just don't want to have to deal with their phone system, even if it's just making small changes. The reason I'm mentioning all of this up front is as we map the customer journey, we're going to be identifying where that aha moment is, where they get excited. So for Coastal Voice, the moment that a customer or future customer realizes that they have a problem is usually when they become unhappy with either their current phone service, or they don't have one and they realize that they need one. And usually they become unhappy because there's a particular feature that they're missing that doesn't allow them to do X, or they're really unhappy with the customer support, or maybe it's just too expensive and they want to look around and find something else. So the first thing that they're going to do when they search for solutions is going to ask friends and fellow businesses, like 100% of the time. And this is going to be consistent with most small businesses, I think, small business products, they're always going to ask someone else, like, hey, what are you using? If they can't find any that way, then they might go online and actually do a search, or look at some online resources, or perhaps, they had interaction with someone in the community or a salesperson, and they said, hey, you know what, I remember that person. Let me reach out to them and see if I can talk to them about it. So that's their problem search part. For the discovery and education, usually they're not going to spend a lot of time looking at alternatives. Usually it's, I need it to do X, or I need to overcome this problem. I want to make sure that the price, meets my budget. It's the same or not more than what I'm paying now. They're usually not going to do a ton of discovery. And then when they're ready, part of that education and discovery phase is they're going to want to have a meeting. And because Coastal Voice's main differentiator is that local support, we had a lot of conversations about, what's the goal? What are we pushing people towards online? What are we pushing towards them in our brochures and our content and all of our interactions? And it's really setting up an in-person meeting, or it could also be virtual, and doing a demo. The reason, it has nothing to do with the product itself. I mean, again, phone services are more or less a commodity. There's a few things that are different, but it's getting to the point where you can look them in the eye and show them that you're local. You're actually interested in what they have to say. You're not just like some tech who's going to install their phone system and doesn't care about their business. So based on the owner's experience, this has always been when people kind of go, oh my gosh, of course I'm going to, go with you guys because this is the thing that I want, and it's different from, whatever it is that I'm using or that I'm looking for. So then in terms of the conversion cycle, after the meeting, there would be a proposal, they would sign the forms, they would pay. The onboarding, there's an in-person meeting and site survey where we go through all of their specific configuration needs. And this is really reinforcing that differentiator that I mentioned in the customer journey. And we also market that we have this onboarding meeting. And then after the onboarding meeting, we do the whole setup, and then we come back to do an installation and configuration on site, show them how to use it. Again, that's a huge differentiator from some of the other alternatives. So that's going to be brought back up into the sales and marketing cycle and the content. And then ongoing usage, customers call, they email with questions. Something we're looking at is how to proactively send information on how to do certain things to basically increase their usage, increase their dependence on the system, increase their satisfaction. We want them to feel like they're getting more for their money. And then, of course, there's sending the receipt of payment every month. There's maybe some opportunities there to increase, satisfaction or messaging. And then the last thing that we're going to start doing is sending emails specifically asking for referrals, offering, 1 month free if they refer others, and others get 1 month free. So this is literally the end-to-end customer journey for Coastal Voice, high level. And I mentioned a few kind of opportunities and, ways that by mapping out this journey, and this was very recent that we did this, by mapping out this journey, we were able to make some decisions and improve the, the way that we interact with customers. All right, so very different. This is the user journey, because they're not actually customers until the very end, for a typical developer tool. So this came from Zenaton. I was working with Zenaton up until COVID, actually. And so most developers do not like to be contacted. All developer tools have to be inbound in terms of interest. And this is what we mapped out initially. It's funny because we ended up having a very different customer journey because we had a different persona in the end than we initially thought. But for a typical developer tool, a developer is coding away and they realize, oh my gosh, I need to be able to do X. I need this thing. So they're going to go online and they're going to search Reddit. They're going to search all these places, even a Google search if they have to, where they're going to look, or they're going to search GitHub. They're going to look for, open source libraries. They're going to look for, recommendations. They're going to look for people that are like saying, hey, I did this by doing this other thing, by using this tool. They're going to find several options. They're going to want to look around. That's their persona. They're very curious, interested in lots of different things. Then when they find one or two that they really like, they're going to go through their discovery and validation. They're going to read reviews. They're going to, look at the stars on GitHub. They're going to ask people, hey, have you ever used this thing? Do you know anything about it? Then they would sign up and try it out. And the sign up and try it out part for a developer tool is actually like an investment of time. They're actually going to sometimes install it. They're going to have to use it for something. A lot of tools now, especially the SaaS tools, have really good tutorials, which allows you to get to the aha moment of actually seeing something work. without having to think of what you would use it for, because that's actually a major friction point or blocker for developer tools. They don't want to use it in production yet, but they want to like see if it works. So I'm just making sure everyone's still there. Yeah, great. All right, and then, so this is an interesting about for a developer tool, the education and onboarding actually comes after they sign up, usually. That's where we send the automated nurturing emails. This is where we're explaining like how to use it. The onboarding is so important. You basically have like, I don't know, especially for a SaaS tool, you have like a couple of minutes to catch their attention after they sign up, or they're like, oh, this is too complicated. Like, I'm gonna move on to like those 5 other tools that I identified that might solve my problem. So the education onboarding for this type of product comes after sign up. And the goal of that education onboarding is really to like kind of drip feed small features and get them to the point where they're able to like invest a little bit of time and see like, see the results quickly. Whether it's sample projects or giving them ideas of things that they can use it for within their own, their own software. And then the goal is to get them to a point. And so this is all inside of the conversion phase. So here we have education onboarding after sign up and inside conversion. So it's a little different from the small business phone service that I just showed you. So once they've actually started using it, and it's a huge freemium model, they can use it for free, forever, depending on their usage. But the goal is through nurturing and kind of those automated communications to get them to a point where they've used it enough that it provides value for them and they want to pay for it. Or, and this is where we were actually wrong, we made assumptions. We thought that we were trying to get more into software teams, and we thought that the individual developers would find it, try it, use it, and then kind of push it upstream so that their company would use it, their software team. And we actually found that in order to get into software teams, this is not the customer journey. It was more about going directly to the CTOs and pitching them on the business use cases for the platform, and then kind of, and I'm going to show you an enterprise customer journey next, but actually working through the relationships, and then they would make a decision based on the alternatives that they were researching at a high level, and then get their chief engineer to kind of try it out and run some experiments with it and see if it worked. And this would take 6 to 9 months. So this was kind of this is the user journey for a developer tool, but it turns out that we were not a developer tool. We were a software platform for teams. So, okay. All right, so the last example is going to be also a software tool, but this is going to be, and I called it the sales journey because I didn't go beyond the launch, but this is for an enterprise level machine learning software, the one that I mentioned. So this is also a software product, but completely different target persona and a completely different journey to get it to a point where they're using it. So this target is going to be the head of innovation at a very large company that has a significant amount of data. Think like, insurance, financial, healthcare. And their job as head of innovation is to basically find ways to use their data to do more, to build better products, to get better insights, to give their company a competitive edge. So they're always going to want to look at new technology. They're always going to want to, evaluate like, oh, how can I fit this in? How can we use this in our company? Is this something that can help us improve? So they're going to be really eager to always like try new tools. And as a result, the way of contacting them is usually outbound. They're not out there like searching necessarily, like they're just being contacted by a lot of people. So usually when you reach out to them, they're always happy to have a meeting with a startup that's solving their problem. So usually the first meeting is really high level. They're not usually technical, so it's more focused on the problem that the startup is solving. In this case, the startup is solving the problem of protecting the privacy of the users, but still allowing machine learning and AI to happen. And so a lot of this is about educating them on why it's a problem right now, and understanding their current process, and explaining to them how it could be better, and also maybe some of the problems they're not aware of. They might not be aware that by anonymizing the data and copying it and giving it to their data scientists, they're still leaving themselves open to privacy risks. So in this case, that education actually happens at this very first level, and it might make them aware of a problem that they didn't even realize they had before. So again, you remember those 3 steps that I showed you? They can really be interchangeable in terms of the order, depending on your product. So this is why it's highly individual based on your product, the customer journey. And that's why I wanted to show you 3 different examples so you can really get a sense of, how different they can be. But the stages are the same, but the order changes. All right, so after the initial meeting, if the head of innovation is like, oh, this is interesting, the next step, it's not like, great, sign on the dotted line. The next step is like, let's keep in touch. So the company is going to continue to send the materials, nurturing them, continuing to educate them on the problems of privacy and some different ideas and examples. And at this point, it's up to the head of innovation, or CIO, as I've called them here. They're thinking about it, and they're thinking like, what's a good project for me to try this out on? And they're going to be circulating information internally. They're going to be talking to like maybe the data team, the data science team, some of the business units. They're keeping this in their head with all the other solutions they're looking at. And they're trying to figure out, how can I try this out? What's the return on the potential return on this? How much effort is it going to take me? So they're going to be considering all those things. And then they're going to continue having more meetings internally, and they're probably going to keep in touch with the startup if they're interested. And then when they get to the point where they identify, so they identify a project. Once they've identified a project, then they're going to go back, get more information, have more meetings, talk to the technical people and the stakeholders in a specific project. And then if they want to move forward, they're going to come back to the company, and the company is going to do some tutorials for the data scientists and the technical people and get into the nitty-gritty of exactly how it's going to work. And then this is going to allow, so once the technical people sign off on it, then, we can progress. Then we have to wait for the project to actually happen, which usually takes, anywhere from 3 to 12 months. There has to be an approval process. And then the startup is finally able to do a POC, proof of concept, where they come in and basically like get everything up and running, and it's not even on real data yet. At this point, they're still, showing that it can be used. Once they run the POC, if it's a success, then they finally get to launch. So this is typical for any enterprise software companies. This is a very different customer journey than what we just looked at for the individual developer tool. It's much longer. And again, that education and discovery kind of comes first in the journey. So, all right, so those are 3 really good examples to help you understand. All right, so in terms of how we map the customer journey, and I'm actually going to stop just for a minute, and I'm going to ask, does anyone have any questions? All right, I'll keep going. It's either a good or bad sign. All right, so how we map the journey. This is an iterative process. You're not going to get it right the first time. In fact, this is something you just continue doing all the time. I feel like I spend all my time mapping customer journeys as a product and marketing person, even as a consultant. So the first thing you want to do is just put something on paper. So you get there and you're like, number 1, this is where our customers come from. So once you kind of put your first idea on paper, then you're going to go do a bunch of research and discovery to validate this and to get a lot more detailed and kind of like dissect each step and just make it, better and more accurate. You're going to do this by talking to other people, including your customers, and you're going to just continue this process. And again, just remember that each interaction is an opportunity to not just to like improve the customer's experience, but also to reinforce your company's value, reinforce the thing, your messaging, your positioning, and as I said before, learn from your customer. All right, so how you're going to map your V1. And actually, your V0 is the one that you yourself write on paper just to come up with your skeleton. So your V1 is where you're actually doing your research. I should have called it your V2. But so you're gonna talk to everyone who talks to your customers. If you're at a big company, this is gonna be a lot of people. If you're a startup, like it might just be you, or somewhere in between. And who knows, there might be some outside consultants that you work with, but yeah, anyone who has any interaction with your customers, you want to talk to them and you want to kind of get that full context, that full story of what the customers are going through, what their motivations are at each step, what they care about, what they're thinking about. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, what you want to ask. You also want to collect any data points and qualitative feedback that you have electronically. So data points are going to be if you have marketing data, if you have website statistics, if you use some sort of CRM, if you have MailChimp and you're sending newsletter and people are clicking on it and doing things. Attribution data is going to be where your customers are hearing about you, where they're coming from. I encourage smaller companies to keep a list of all their customers and kind of write in the list like where the customers heard about them and why they chose them, so they can kind of go back and use that information. And then any sort of qualitative feedback, if you have, when customers first sign up, if you have a chat on your website, if you have people emailing you with questions, if you have customers emailing you for support. So all of that is really great data that you can pull back in and kind of like use it to dig into the motivation and map out each of those steps for your customers, and especially identify friction points. That's where the email content from customers is helpful. And then the last part is you're going to talk to your customers. You are going to interview your customers, and then you're going to try to come up with a regular way of always interviewing your new customers, because a new customer is going to be able to give you perspective that an existing customer doesn't have anymore. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that next. But you don't talk to your customers before you have a pretty good idea of your customer journey already, because you want to use your conversations with customers to really expand on each of those and really understand, dig into like the motivations and the psychology of the customer at each step. And that'll actually be your most valuable data in the end. All right, so here's the questions that you want to ask at each step. So you literally want to answer these questions for every single step of your customer journey, even the micro steps, not just those 3 big ones that I identified. So what matters to your customer and what do they need to accomplish at this point? If you remember for the customer journeys, the examples that I showed you, I talked about the persona and the thing that was important to them and kind of how they wanted to be contacted, or how they were contacted, how they reached out. So there's an example of where I asked and answered that question. But even at the step where you're looking at your conversion and you're looking at the education and onboarding, let's say you have a freemium product, online product, and someone has just signed up. What's the information that matters to them at that point, and what are they trying to accomplish? Like if they've just signed up, they want to know, does this work for me? They want to do that one thing that like they've signed up to see if it works for, and they want to figure out how to do that thing as quickly as possible. They don't want to like spend a bunch of time trying to like discover and go through your product. They want to get to that point quickly. That's like, does this work for me? Does this do that one thing I want to do? And if you have a product that has a lot of features and you're not sure what that thing is that they're trying to do, then you need to build in a way to reach out to them at that moment and say, hey, how can we help you? How can we help you do your thing? Like, what is it that you need? Maybe you send them some resources. There's a lot of B2B software companies that will immediately send an email asking to set up a demo. So really understanding like at each step, what is it that they want right now? What's the thing that's going to help them? What do they need to be successful? So this is slightly different than what's important to them. What do they need to be successful is, what is it that has to happen? What result do they need to get, or what action do they need to take in order to move to the next step in the journey? So at a high level, when you're looking at, discovery, education, conversion, we're talking about big things like they need to sign the paperwork, they need to put in their credit card, they need to, decide that it works for them. But on a micro level, once you've built, or once you've got your customer journey built and you're breaking it down into micro steps, it becomes actually kind of a lot more important in terms of what's the email that we need to send to them, or what's the content that they need, or when we have that conversation with them, what's the information that we need to provide to them so that they can make the next decision. In the case of the machine learning software, it was providing them with, the nurturing emails that might go anywhere from 3 to 6 months, where they're kind of drip feeding this information that allows the head of innovation to figure out which project they're going to try, they're going to try this on. And then there was the part where they had to provide the tutorial for the data scientists, because in order for the project to move forward, the data scientists have to sign off on it. All right, and then the last part is, why are they taking this action? So whatever action that they've taken to get to this step, or they need to take to the next one, like what's the motivation behind it? It's kind of related to the first two, but it's also a little bit different, and it's important to always ask that question. And this is more their goal in actually, doing X or wanting Y. And this is going to allow you to identify some really specific opportunities or friction points. And there's way more questions, but these are the top 3 that since we're going to stay at a high level today. All right, so here's what you want to ask new customers. So once you've mapped your journey and kind of like talked to your employees and everyone that talks to customers and pulled in your data, and now you're starting to feel like you've got a pretty good, let's call it a hypothesis, because you're constantly validating and improving on it. But now is the time that you want to go and talk to your customers. I didn't put in here about existing customers, but that's a different conversation, where you should talk to your existing customers and ask them. You can ask them these things; they're not new anymore, but Yeah, you can still ask existing customers this. So for new customers, and this is more than just mapping your customer journey, you actually want to have a way to always ask these questions to new customers, because they're really good questions that are going to help you just understand and improve your whole customer experience and your sales and marketing. But where did you hear about us? And in addition to that, find out what other solutions they were looking for. And what was important to them. So going back to like understand what's important to them, because the moment that a customer is like looking for something to solve that problem, they're going to be thinking about things that they're not going to be thinking about later. So they're going to say, yeah, so Postal Voice, great example. We came in and did a demo. The customer had found us online, which was unusual at the time. We just released a new website. Normally it's word of mouth. So I said, well, how'd you guys hear about us? And she said, well, we were really unhappy with our phone service because of X. And I asked everyone I knew if they knew of any local providers and all the other businesses. And she said nobody knew of any. And so I did a Google search, and y'all weren't on the first page or the second or the third page. But I found you, and there was someone else, I think in Bluffton or somewhere. So I just called and asked and they had one specific thing that they wanted to be able to do with their phones. And I said, hey, can you do this thing? And like, you're local, great. Can you come in and meet with us and show us what you have? So in that conversation, I understood what she was looking for, what other solutions she looked at, how she found us, what other ways she tried to find us, what was unsuccessful, and then what was important to her. So that's a conversation you should have with new customers. Why did you choose us? This is going to be more about usually, features, or, in the case of Postal Voice, the local service is a big selling point. And this is really trying to understand the aha moment as we talk. It's that thing that customers go, aha, like, yes, this is what I want. And you should always know what your aha moment is. Most salespeople know. Marketing people don't always know. But when you have a long onboarding and conversion cycle, understanding what that is and understanding all the different ways that you can kind of get someone to that point and help them and nurture them is really important in that part of the journey. And then the last part, how can we improve? So this isn't really asking about how your product can be better because they're a new customer. This is more asking about how that process could have been better. So, were there things that we could have told you sooner? Are there things that I've talked to people, and you find this a lot with software products that are really technical and have a lot of features, something that I've worked a lot on. When people actually start using your product, a lot of times, and you ask these questions and they say, initially I didn't understand this, and I didn't understand that it could do this thing for me. But now, once I spent all this time investing in your product and learning about it, using it, trying it, now I understand that it can do this for me, and that's really valuable. And I didn't even understand that in the beginning. So that's a great opportunity to take that information and bring it back to like earlier in the customer journey, understanding that persona and why that's important to them, and find a way to like get that in earlier so that, you can help convert people earlier. So the how can we improve is more about, really specifically understanding how they made that decision and what information was important, but more importantly, like what you could have done better to kind of shorten that journey, or to, help them through it. All right. So that's how we map the journey. And the technicalities of mapping it, as I said, you can just get a Google Doc or Google Sheet and just write it down, and because it's so unique, depending on the product, depending on, the reason that you're mapping it, you just want to like have a format. I like to use Notion a lot, but you want to have a format that you can just write a lot of content and change it and change the formatting around. So you don't want to, like get yourself into some specific tool that isn't flexible. Actually, Google Slides is another great opportunity. It's also important that it's shareable, because as I said, this is an iterative and collaborative process. So this isn't something that you sit down for an hour in your office one day and do. Like, this is something that you work together with your colleagues, and you're going to continue working on it over time. Every time you consider a new feature, new market opportunities, update your messaging, new website, whatever, like you're always going to keep going back to that customer journey and keep kind of like changing it, and it's going to evolve and looking at it in different dimensions. So what's the goal of doing this? So here's those three stages that I mentioned earlier. And what's the reason that, what's the question that you're trying to answer in mapping out each of the customer journey at each stage? So for the problem search part, what is that problem, and where are they searching, what are they searching for? So really understanding like the moment when they realize they have a problem, what triggers that moment. Sometimes it can be a catastrophic failure for software. Sometimes it can be more of an itch where they're trying to accomplish X. But for developer tools, I spend a lot of time looking at online forums and looking at the way people are talking about things, the language that they're using, the way that they're talking about other solutions, competitor solutions. So really understanding like what is it that people view as their problem, because sometimes what they view as their problem is not necessarily the same thing as your value proposition, and that's okay. But being able to speak to their problem and understanding where they're looking for it, and therefore how you can reach them. The education part, this is going to be more about the positioning of your product. So for this, you really need to understand what the alternatives are to your product. What are they doing now? And you want to create content around that. You want to create content that takes them from what they have now to where you are and why it's different. A great example of this, the machine learning software company, they're kind of a category creator. Like there's not a lot of products that do what they do. And the way that people are trying to protect their data right now is through using anonymization. Or data masking, as it's called. So data masking allows you to truncate and hide all of the fields so that the data scientists can still use the data, but it's kind of watered down. So what we did is we created a blog post on the limitations of data masking and how to overcome them. And this was directly positioning their product against the accepted way of doing things. And one of the reasons we did it is because in sales meetings, he said, I get the question over and over. How does this compare to data masking? Because you don't want your customers to have to read all your features and benefits and understand your product and get to the point where they can then interpolate how it's different from what they're doing. You just want to tell them up front. So positioning yourself directly against the alternatives. In the case of Coastal Voice, we know that the local support is going to be one of the main differentiators because, people are using Comcast Business, they're using Vonage, RingCentral, all these online tools. So know upfront, what they have now and how you can say, oh, well, we're just like that, but we're better because we have that X. And this is going to be something that reverberates through your content and your sales, and it's going to be part of that whole attraction cycle, I guess. For the conversion, you're really trying to understand what the aha moment is and how to get them to that moment through, and again, as I described, the conversion can involve a lot of different things depending on the product. But the most important part is knowing what's the thing that gets them to go, yes, sign me up, or when their face lights up during the demo. In terms of ongoing usage, and with a lot of companies, this is kind of where they have the most opportunity for improvement. Because once they get customers, they just kind of throw them over the fence and they've got, whatever customer support. They figure the less you talk to your customers, the better. But here you're really going to be asking yourself, what can we do to increase usage? How can we add more value? How can we get our customers to refer us? That's very important. Because if they're happy, they're going to, refer you. And a lot of businesses grow best through word of mouth. And then another thing that I didn't mention here, but really getting to know your customers.
Yvonne,
yeah.
Before you move too far past referrals, Sandy has a question about referrals.
Oh,
Sandy,
sure.
you want to ask a question? Or do you want me to ask it?
Oh, hi. I was taking notes. So yeah, I just was wondering, hi, I'm Sandy. Thank you so far for everything you said. Just about your referrals, is that anything that you've fleshed out in any depth, or I've come across this thing called referral candy. Mm-hmm. I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that. And plus, my other question actually happened to be about your researching. So other than just Googling a search, which obviously YouTube and Google we want to do, but I just wondered about those things.
Yeah. Well, in terms of referrals, before we talk about the tools, organically, if people are happy with you, they are going to mention you to their fellow businesses or friends. Or I would say for any business, customers are a huge source of new business. Just without any sort of special tools, without asking for referrals, it just happens organically. But there are definitely ways. So for Coastal Voice is what we're working on. There are definitely ways to specifically nudge customers to refer their friends and incentivize them to do it. And you see a lot of online softwares like Groupon and, you know, all these, like Dropbox. This is initially how they grew. Whenever you signed up, you would get, you know, 10 megs free if you referred 3 people and they signed up. So these are more of like those like viral referral campaigns. And there are a couple of off-the-shelf tools that you can purchase that it sends an email to your customers. It asks them to refer you. They fill out a form. The form includes all of the email about your, you know, all the information about your customer. They put in their referral's name and email, and then it sends an email to their referral from them with all the information about your company. So you can control the information that they send. And then it tracks, you know, who clicks on the thing. And if they become a customer, then it manages like all of the, you know, the automated communications. To be honest, if you don't have more than like 100 customers, I'm not sure you need an automated tool like that. It's kind of overkill. And honestly, I think it's better to just send an email to customers and say, hi, we really appreciate your business. We know you've enjoyed our product. We would love if you would refer us to, you know, some fellow businesses. If you do that, we'll give you 1 month free. They can get 1 month free. Here's the email to send to them. Here's a PDF brochure so they know, you know, what we're about. So you make it easy for them. They don't have to describe your product. But honestly, like, I think that's all you need to nudge people to refer you if you don't have a ton of customers.
Okay.
The second question about the user or about the research, I wasn't sure what you were asking.
When you said that, you know, when they figure out they have a problem, where are they searching? Which, you know, obviously Google, you type a question in, YouTube is a great place, but I just wondered if you had any other.
Yeah, actually that's the question you need to ask to your new customers. And you ask them, and I always ask people that, oh, you know, where did you look? Where, and so the person that I spoke with, the one that I mentioned, she said the first thing she did was ask every other business owner that she knew. So she didn't go to Google first. And I can tell you with developers, they would look at Reddit first. You know, CTOs, they're going to go, there's specific sites where they go to evaluate new software tools. So most people, I don't think, do a Google search first. You do a Google search when you haven't found anything in the channels that you expect to find something. I mean, for a lot of consumers, they're going to go on Facebook. They're going to go on a Facebook group and say, hey, does anyone, can anyone refer X? So depending on your business, your product, your customer, and you can even have multiple personas that are going to search in different places. That's why you have to talk to those new customers and ask them where they're searching so that you can fill out like that top of the funnel in your customer journey. And more importantly, what they're searching for. When I started talking to Coastal Voice customers, I realized that we had optimized our website for the wrong keywords. We were optimized, and I didn't do it, but we were optimized for voice over IP and PBX Cloud. Who's searching for PBX Cloud, People are searching for like Savannah business or like business phone service. But I didn't get that until I had talked to some of our new customers and said, oh, you did a Google search. What were you searching for? But the Google search was the last resort for them.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So let me jump back in here. All right. So yeah, the ongoing usage, this is going to be the part where you can increase the value. And, oh, this is what I was going to say last. There's also an opportunity here to understand adjacent products and features and services. I was working with a company in Paris that had grown into like a global BPM software for large enterprises, and they had stagnant growth because there were all of these like new startups that had like, whiz bang, like better UI products, and they were trying to find ways to like improve their offering and grow into like adjacent markets. And I worked with their head of product to create this, basically a customer survey that their customer success team could implement and start interviewing all of their existing customers and understanding what some of the adjacent pain points were for their product. And pretty quickly they identified that the process of getting the product up and running was actually really difficult. And there were some opportunities through increasing the communication on the design between the technical team and the business team. So anyway, just by going in and identifying this part of the customer journey and asking questions, they were able to come up with some ideas for a way to make their product better, but also to launch an adjacent product. So there's this number 3, like there's so much. If you have a lot of customers and you're looking to grow and get more customers and retain customers, there's a lot of opportunity there. And most companies do not, they're so focused on top of the funnel that they lose the opportunity there. All right, so just a few examples of new opportunities that you might be able to identify and from doing this customer journey mapping. Updating marketing and sales content is easy and obvious. Improving and automating customer communications at different steps of the journey. Improving and automating onboarding and education. There's a lot there. Identifying common stumbling blocks during onboarding or usage. And then identifying new features or adjacent product opportunities, which I mentioned. I'm not going to talk about them because I feel like I've already talked about all of them. Some friction points that you might identify, and this is usually more related to when people are actually using your product. So within the last part of the customer journey, you're probably going to quickly find things that customers are confused about, they didn't understand up front. This is going to come through questions that they ask, maybe customer interviews where they say, yeah, there was this thing, like I didn't really get it, now I do. So you're gonna be able to go back earlier in the customer journey and improve that, for the next person and make it easier and simpler to understand. For a lot of products, especially, that the whole onboarding sequence can be significantly improved. Understanding how customers want to interact and reach you. This, especially for small businesses, their communication sometimes could be better. So understanding when customers want to hear from you, what they want to hear from you, how you reach out to them, whether it's an email, whether it's a phone call or text. So that's an opportunity to make the process a lot smoother. Automate onboarding and education. That's both a friction point and an opportunity. New metrics and ways to track them. And actually, I think I might have confused my two slides here, but anyway. So this can be a friction point or an opportunity, but when you identify an opportunity or friction point, and you're like, how can this be better? Let's implement some tracking and let's come up with some metrics that we can look at to see like what our progress is on this, how we can make it better. But usually you want to have some metrics and reports to be able to measure your progress on those things. Specific channels and messaging. This actually belongs in opportunities. That's an obvious one. And then the last part is the need for new and better technologies. This has to do specifically with operations. So you might identify some things that just aren't working very well, or could be a lot better if you had like a better automated email system, for example, or some operational software that allowed your systems to talk to each other, or maybe it's implementing Zapier to trigger something in one tool when something happens in another one. So high level here, but these are some of the opportunities that you would look for. And that's the conclusion of my presentation. I hope you liked it. And does anyone have any questions?
Awesome, thank you. I love it. And I like the way so I've seen this taught from a user experience perspective, which always focuses on nice, pretty graphs. This is more on the meat of, okay, the customer experience and mapping it to the product and content more than a pretty graph. And I'm not good at pretty graphs. So this I can do. This I could write out a series of bullet points as this is the process my customer goes. Mm-hmm. So I think it, for those of us that are not so graphically inclined, gives us a good path forward too.
You spend so much time trying to make it look good, but in your case, if you're talking about the Creative Coast, you actually have a couple of different customer personas. So the customer journey is going to be different for each one of them, at different stages. So yeah, I think it's way better. I mean, I just start with a whiteboard, and then I take what's on the whiteboard, and then I find a way to, and I like Notion a lot because you can create columns really easily in Notion that you can't do in Google Docs. But I always start with a whiteboard, and then I take what's on the whiteboard and I find a way to write it down.
Yeah, you mentioned Notion again, and I had been testing that software and then put it on the back burner, and it made me think, okay, I need to go back in there and look at it again.
Yeah, it's a good all-in-one tool.